Faye, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. He's on his way up. Just give him some noise.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. You're welcome. We are sorry for the late start. Okay, Pastor is here. Great. Welcome.
Yeah, it's warm greetings, everyone. God bless you all. We are here to start the program, the Nigeria Energy Crisis Potentials and Solutions, the Nigerian Energy Crisis. Well, maybe it's better to say the Nigerian energy situation, what the solutions and the potentials are. The gentleman that's going to be speaking to us today is the head of energy and a partner of the infrastructure group at the Advocaat law practice. His area of focus is electricity, finance, oil and gas, solid minerals law, and has advised several independent power producers, exploration and production companies, oil and service contractors, multinationals, and high net worth clients on a wide range of assignments. You are welcome to today's program. He studied at the University of Buckingham, England, has a master's degree in natural resources, law and policy from the Center for Energy, Petroleum, Mineral Law and Policy, University of Dundee, Scotland, UK, and attended several continuing education courses such as the law firm partner, leader at Cambridge, and also regulation of gas markets at the Florence School of Regulation, Robert Schuman Center in the European University Institute. Yeah, welcome, Mr. Alokolaro. Ola, thank you very, very much for agreeing to speak to us today at the Nigerian Leadership Series of the African Leadership Group. Thank you so much. Maybe you need to just give us, by way of introduction, what the situation in Nigeria is as regards energy, what the history of energy is in Nigeria, and then we will take it from there. And if you want to reintroduce yourself and explain to us a bit more about who you are, what you do, that also is acceptable. Please unmute yourself and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Pastor Ighodalo. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. I've taken it in that order. Based on the fact that we're speaking from Nigeria and it's evening here. I want to thank you very much for having me come and share my views on the current happenings in the energy sector in Nigeria, and to determine amongst ourselves, based on the presentation, whether we have a crisis on our hands or not, and if we collectively agree that we do, how do we prefer solutions, given the fact that we have a new government, and hopefully whatever solutions we collectively agree, I think some of us may be best placed to have the listening ear of the present administration. So I would like to begin by sharing my presentation with you. One second, please. Okay, I believe an introduction has been made as it relates to who I am. I'm a partner with a law firm with offices in both Lagos and in Abuja. And I regularly advise clients in the energy space across the entire value chain, from exploration and production through to midstream issues, and also downstream, including the gas to power value chain. So I'll be talking a little bit about what's going on in the oil and gas sector, how we can further develop our gas sector. I'll also look at the solid mineral sector, and the reasoning there is because of the critical minerals that play or will play a role in terms of Nigeria being able to meet its net zero obligations. And like I said, if we all collectively determine that we do have a crisis on our hands, then we'll talk about the possible solutions, and then obviously questions and answers and a discussion amongst ourselves later on. So I'd just like for us to take a minute just to look at these various headlines. Some of us who are stakeholders or followers of the oil and gas industry will find some of these headlines as being familiar. I'll share another set of headlines with you. And I'm sure some of these are also very familiar across the room. And we can all say, to some degree, that we're all experiencing one or the other of these issues. Now, if we acknowledge that most of the revenue that we use in developing our country is derived from crude oil production, and we look again at these headlines, we must readily accept that we have a crisis on our hands, as our main source of income is threatened. But why is it threatened? Are these threats self-inflicted? And if so, how do we retrace our steps? Is there anything else that we can do to ensure that we improve the lot of our people? So, what happened to the golden goose? So for several decades, we've had in place, systems to attain production levels of over 2 million barrels per day on a regular basis. In 2012, we began to see a slump in our production levels. So what were the reasons? Several reasons can be adduced for the slump, and these include protracted and undue delays in granting approvals for major project development, delay in passing the governing legislation for the petroleum industry in the form of the PIA now, but PIB as it was then, which was eventually passed in 2021 after 2 decades with the legislature. Clearly, this delay created so much uncertainty within the sector that investment that was meant for Nigeria was diverted to other much more attractive destinations, such as Mozambique and Angola. Other reasons include, as stated here, divestments by the IOCs to indigenous companies, some of whom, through no fault of their own, were hampered in optimizing the assets that they bought due to lack of core skills. We saw in the previous headline about Jackba of skilled workers. And then, of course, there's the issue of lack of access to funding, given the clamor around energy transition and the traditional financiers from the Western nations being reluctant to continue to fund crude oil development. Then we have the insecurity that was prevalent in the Niger Delta region, the vandalism, theft and sabotage, and host community issues that we had in the Niger Delta, which eventually resulted in our production level going below 1 million barrels per day sometime last year. We also had external factors, which meant oil prices were extremely volatile. We had the Russian-Ukraine war, we still have that. We have the civil war in Libya. And then we have the regular economic face-off with Iran and Venezuela. And last but not least, the energy transition clamor, as I earlier mentioned. Now, despite the fact that Nigeria increased the number of producers from 10 in the 1980s to 40 and over in the 2000s, we find ourselves still producing less oil, unable to meet our OPEC quota. And of course, you will agree with me that it looks as if the crisis is self-inflicted, particularly if you juxtapose the low production with the volatile oil prices. You will see why we have a foreign exchange crisis on our hands, because we're no longer earning enough. And you will also see, and I can readily say now that it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons why some of the refineries may not be working optimally due to vandalism of pipelines that convey oil to those refineries. So the picture is pretty grim when it comes to our crude oil production. But we shall come to how we may be able to resolve some of the issues shortly. But before that, I would want us to look at some of our other subsectors. So, gas. Our gas reserves are so vast that we're ranked 9th in the world behind the likes of Russia and Qatar. And we all know what they have been able to do with the revenues that they've earned from their gas production. So if we have so much gas reserves, and we're known to be a gas province with only a pool of oil, why then are we still in this economic quagmire? Most of our gas is associated gas derived from crude oil production. So naturally, it makes sense that if we're having issues with crude oil production, same will be applicable to our gas production, as has been evidenced by the amount of gas available for our NLNG cargoes. Now, the NLNG is our flagship gas export project. And now we're struggling to provide the necessary feedstock for that project to be able to earn the forex revenues that we need. In addition, we previously lacked a domestic market to consume the gas produced. So most of it was just merely flared. Revenue being lost, valuable revenue. Niger Delta has 178 gas flare sites out of the 16,000 identified in about 90 countries. Indeed, lack of planning, given the delays in the passage of the PID, and clarity around the terms for development of gas that would allow for the emergence of governing agreements, such as gas development agreements and gas PSCs, to govern the exploitation of these reserves, led us to missing out on two critical LNG gas projects, the Alokolaro LNG and the Brass LNG, that would today have generated vast revenues for us, given the recent high global price of gas. The lack of a functional domestic gas market with the appropriate infrastructure to transport the gas to hubs has hindered our industrialization and our ability to become a manufacturing hub to take advantage of initiatives such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. The gas to power market, which is at the forefront of the creation of a robust domestic gas market, is a welcome development. And the recent constitutional amendment that allows for states to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity will only serve to deepen the market. There are, however, bottlenecks that requires urgent attention. The pricing issues for midstream and downstream gas projects appears to have been resolved with the introduction of the pricing template as provided under the PIA, though the rollout of infrastructure required for a vibrant domestic gas market is still a long way off, which means the growth of the gas to power market will continue to be stifled. There are other issues further downstream of the value chain that also need to be addressed, and these include securitization of payments to gas producers and the weak and unenforceable gas sales purchase agreements that are currently in place. I stated before at the start of the presentation that there are critical minerals that can be utilized in our energy value chain, such as lithium and graphite to create batteries that can be used as renewable energy. So every time that there's an oil shock and the oil prices crash, you will tend to see these headlines. And the headlines last for as long as the oil prices bounce back up again. So just mere rhetoric. But it's important that we begin to consider how we ensure that we are intentional about developing our mining sector. What are the reasons? Like I said, we're constantly susceptible to oil shocks. Each time there's an oil shock, we're in trouble. There's a recession automatically in Nigeria, right? Secondly, is the disruption to crude oil. Like I said, shale gas was the in thing a short while ago, and now it's battery taking over. There's also the issue of new oil and gas producers emerging in East Africa, who are closer to the Asian market that we used to dominate. So that will present a challenge for us in terms of market access. And then we talk about the local issues. Clearly, we're in a recession. We're not out of it, right? Then we have the issue of insecurity, right, which is really brought about largely because of unemployment. And based on what we discussed earlier on, we're not really carrying out a lot more exploration in terms of development of our crude oil. Based on the reserves that we have in Nigeria, we're at the moment only producing 2% of our reserves. So we have an array of mineral deposits, and the beauty about it is it's spread across all 36 states of the Federation. We used to be a major exporter of tin, columbite, and coal in the 1960s and 1970s, but with the advent of oil, we dropped the ball as it relates to this particular sector. So 44 different types of minerals identified in commercial quantity across the country, with the 5 main groups listed as we see them on the slide. Just to depict to you how mineral rich we are and how spread out these minerals are across the length and breadth of the country. So clearly, if you agree with me, we do have a crisis on our hands. How then do we solve it? There's a common theme running through each of these sectors that I spoke about. One is the issue of security. 2 is the issue of infrastructure deficit. And the third is funding. So in terms of solutions for the oil sector, when we look at the head security, luckily the Petroleum Industry Act has introduced the Host Community Development Fund, which should help as it places a responsibility on host communities to protect the infrastructure within their domain. I think as far as vandalism goes, we should be looking at introducing anti-theft solutions such as CCTV and drones. In terms of infrastructure deficits, there's a clear need to upgrade the pipelines and other evacuation facilities. And then, of course, we need to either repair or sell underperforming assets, such as the refineries that we have, whilst we encourage
No, I might just need to get
modular refineries.
Please unmute yourself again, sir. Mr. Alokolaro, please unmute yourself.
Please unmute yourself again. I am. Hola.
Okay, with respect to funding, I'll just repeat that we need to seek consolidation and strategic alliance amongst our indigenous companies so that they can pool funds together to enhance exploration and development projects. Like I stated, we're only producing 2% of our reserves. We need to pursue more exploration and development of our crude oil a lot more aggressively than we have been doing. I know we have OPEC thresholds, but as we speak, we're even nowhere near meeting those thresholds. We also need to fast track the proposed energy bank being proposed by some of the DFIs to fund oil and gas development in Africa in light of the reluctance by the traditional financial institutions to continue to fund crude oil development. And Nigeria must be at the forefront in pushing this agenda forward.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. As it relates to gas, in terms of security, the measures need to be similar to those we want to adopt for oil. We must ensure we protect the infrastructure to prevent any shut-ins so that security of supply for gas is guaranteed. In terms of infrastructure deficit, we need to revisit the gas master plan to see how we can develop public-private partnership arrangements to bridge the infrastructure gap. The midstream gas infrastructure fund under the PIA is a welcome development in this regard. In terms of funding, definitely more private sector involvement is required. And we must look to revive LNG projects such as the Alokolaro and Brass LNG to leverage on favorable global gas pricing. Mining. There's a need to address the security challenges across the country. We all know how rich some of the northern states in terms of Zamfara is with respect to gold. And of course, the recent findings also in Kaduna, right? So there's a need for the security challenges in those areas as it relates to banditry to be addressed for greater access to these mineral-rich regions. In terms of infrastructure deficit, more investment is going to be required in rail infrastructure. Again, there's been a constitutional amendment that allows for states to embark on road projects. This should allow for ease of access from mines to export terminals. In terms of funding, funding is difficult for mining activities, but some DFIs, such as the African Finance Corporation, are trailblazing in the sector with their partnership with the Solid Mineral Development Fund and also in financing the Segilola Gold Project, which is a phenomenal project that is promoted by a Nigerian, and we're made to understand that the richness of the ore itself is perhaps the best in West Africa. And similar projects need to be encouraged and embarked upon by the private sector, aided by, of course, by the government. I think most important is the fact that we must have an integrated resource management plan that takes cognizance of all of the sectors that has been mentioned, right? They all need to sit together, and we need to understand what our needs are. We need to understand how we're able to satisfy those needs, right? And the Presidential Task Force needs to ensure the orderly implementation of such a plan, right? There's need to engage advisors and staff with the knowledge and experience to help deliver on these objectives. So ministries, from what I understand, typically move their staff around. It's difficult to have any level of continuity if you know, the staff are rotated and a number of them don't quite understand the nuances of the sector and the need and ability to be able to deliver. So I think I'll stop there. I think that's just over 30 minutes, and allow us to engage ourselves as to whether we collectively agree that we have a crisis, and if we do, how we can better resolve them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ola, for that very well thought out and well presented analysis of the oil and gas industry in Nigeria. I'm sure there are quite a few people that have questions here and there. Already a guy called Femi Olowe has raised his hands. But before we do that, I just want to put two questions before you. Then I'm going to ask Sonny to please take over, ask his own questions, and then moderate the question and answer session, because I think your presentation has said most of it. My first question is this: why have we as a nation collectively since 1960, since we gained independence, not taking our oil and gas industry seriously? Why have we, as far as I'm concerned, underdeveloped the oil and gas industry? And I want you to be as plain, as honest, as straightforward, and as brutal as possible. And where necessary, you can name and shame or name names. Why haven't we? Such a very important industry. Why haven't we taken it seriously, and so on and so forth? Ditto for gas. You know, what sort of thing could we have done to make gas a bit more viable? You've spoken about lack of planning, blah, blah, blah. I would like some things, if you can, to be as specific as possible, naming and shaming governments or leaders who have not done us right in this industry, which has propelled and transformed the lives of a lot of other countries, like Qatar, like Dubai, like Saudi Arabia, like Libya. It was a monoproduct economy, and the standard of living of the people there is phenomenal. They may not have as many, as large a population as ours, but I mean, we didn't see the effect. That's number one. Number two is the role of the NNPC thus far. what role has it played, and what role really should it be playing? And then number 3, parts of which you have spoken about, but I want something very much more specific. If you are head of state of Nigeria or minister in charge of petroleum and you had a free hand, you know, the sideline to that question is why do most presidents insist on being also ministers of oil? I don't understand it, why they insist on doing that. But nonetheless, if you are president of Nigeria or minister in charge of petroleum and energy, and you didn't touch too much on our power problem, and what I mean by power, electricity, I think that is really where we have a crisis, you know, and now we're having a crisis in fuel supply and so on and so forth. A country that is so fuel and mineral rich. So if you were head of state or president of Nigeria, what are the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 steps you would take to try and revolutionize or change the trajectory of our gas industry? And then finally, you've also mentioned it, but you didn't drill down deep enough for me. Why have we neglected 44 or 43 other minerals in this country? I mean, Sheglola, I knew about it when it was starting. I must confess that I was one of the ones who thought that it would be a very daunting task. It was actually started by a relative of mine. And for you to tell me now that the gold there is probably better than some of the gold in Ghana, and so on and so forth, is a great amazement to me, meaning that there are many Seglolas out there waiting to be founded with brilliant gold, and nobody's doing anything about it. If you can just give us very short and precise answers to these 4 questions, then I'll allow my co-presenter, Pastor Sonny, to please take over from there. Thank you very much, Ola, for this well-researched. And by the way, people are asking for copies of your presentation, which we will try and make available to them if we have it and if we're not breaching any copyrights, because I know lawyers don't joke. You know, they've done a lot of research and every research is money. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Pastor Ighodalo. Difficult questions. But I think there's one thing that runs through each of those questions, and that is the lack of sincerity of purpose. I think if that was in place, across the nation, right, there wouldn't be any of the issues that we spoke about. We all need to row in the same direction. And then you also have the issue of the fact that ours is a rent-seeking society. So it makes things extremely difficult. But we must have a sector that is run by professionals if we are to get to the promised land. Then you also look at, for instance, America. If you look at the East Coast of America, you will see, and also partly some of the West, you will see, drilling rigs almost all the way down it. And like I said, if we're only producing 2% of our reserves, then we're really not doing enough in terms of opening the sector up, particularly to private participation. So I hope that answers the first question. On the second question, which relates to the role of the NNPC, You know, before NMPC was a policymaker, was a regulator, and also a player within the industry. But this has now been addressed. It took way too long for that to happen with the advent of the Petroleum Industry Act. And it is our hope that NMPC will now, you know, compete with other IOCs and other independents on a level playing field. So that's that with the NMPC. With respect to the gas, I believe, which is the third question, right? I think it's just a function of proper planning. I think it took us a bit too long to really understand that, you know, we had a valuable resource in gas that was extremely valuable and could, you know, revolutionize this country and push this country forward in terms of industrialization. There are several policies in place now. There's the PIA in place that recognizes gas as a standalone resource. And we're beginning to see some level of seriousness in developing our gas with the announcement of the two FLNG projects that NMPC is backing, so that stranded gas can be brought on stream. So I think with proper planning, we can move forward a lot quicker and you know, seek to capitalize on some of these gas prices, high gas prices that is around at the moment. But we've got to hit the ground running now. We don't have a choice. We've almost hit rock bottom. So as it relates to minerals, I think the reason why, you know, like I said, in the 1960s and 70s, we were a mining nation. We actually was exporting coal and other minerals. But with the advent of oil, right, and given the short lead time within which, you know, you can drill a well and, you know, hit oil, vis-a-vis the lead time that it takes to create a mine, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I would rather invest in an oil block because I get quicker returns than with a mine. And you also alluded to that with respect to the Segilola gold mine. So I hope I've been able to address all your questions.
I did ask that if you were head of state or president, what are the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things you will do to transform our oil industry? Maybe starting with the quick wins and then going to the bigger picture.
Okay, so I think first and foremost, there would need to be a gathering of the key stakeholders. When I say the key stakeholders, the oil and gas producers, both IOCs and otherwise, right? And we need to set the agenda before them as relates to what we as a country, Nigeria, is seeking to attain. right? And for me, that would be, I have no objection to exports, provided that there is more than enough also dedicated to the local market for us to be able to power our industries, right, and become a manufacturing hub for the sub-region and also for the continent as a whole. I think if we're able to set that agenda and monitor it aggressively, I think, it would augur well for us, and we will do well for our people.
Okay. I think I'm going to have to let you off. Sonny, please rescue me or rescue him. One of us needs to be rescued.
All right. Thank you very much, Pastor Itua. Ola, you are welcome once again. Thanks for that very fantastic presentation. For me, no matter what experts like you do, say, write, convoke to decide to push forward, politics and politicians always still have their way. So currently, we have this, the whole mix of what you have spoken about have been divided into three ministries. So we have the Ministry of Power, who Bayo Adelabu is in charge of that. He's a finance man, but he's been made Minister of Power. We have Dele Alake, has been made Minister of Mining, Mineral Resources. He's an information man, but he's been made Minister of Mining Resources. Now, I don't know if we have, there's no substantive Minister of Education. I guess the president is keeping that. But we have Minister of State for Gas, Ekperikpo. We have Minister of State for Petroleum, Henikin Lokobiri. All these people together are controlling these minerals that we talked about. Are you confident that we can see anything from these individuals and indeed from this government? Or is just still going to be the same talk? We are not able to make headway. What do you think?
Well, I think things have changed a little bit from, where we're coming from. You may look at it and say, well, where are we coming from? It's one and the same. But the economic situation that we now find ourselves in does not give room for any further laxity, right? Any more than we could have, social crisis on our hands, right? So it's important that, the politicians also realize this, right? Because, ultimately, at some point or the other, they will also be on this side of the fence. So, one, the economy as it is no longer permits us to not work, basically. So we're going to have to sit down and see how we can improve things. And like I said, if this is the only means of income for us, then we don't have any choice but to do the right thing. Because if it continues on a downward spiral, then we're really in for the high jump. So I do not see them, taking their positions for granted.
No, it's not a question. Sorry, let me just follow up a bit on that and we'll open it up. Are you confident in the people, the caliber of people that have been put in those places? We had high hopes when Fashola became Minister of Power. because of what he did in Lagos. In fact, when Buhari and Oshibajo were coming, 8 years has passed. Nothing. We can't see light. We can't export petrol. We are not getting revenue from it. Now, this government have started, because we want to set the agenda. If they are not getting it right, it's good to say it from now. All this idea of let's wait and see, let's wait and see. We've been waiting and we haven't seen anything. Are you confident that these guys that have been put in place can actually deliver for the country?
Well, I mean, okay, so I believe in institutions, right?
Yes.
And that's what I mentioned earlier on, that, the ministries, if they're properly staffed, the regulators, if they're properly staffed with people with the right skill sets, bearing in mind what I said about the Japa syndrome, right? If we have people with the right skill sets, right, then we should be able to move forward. One thing is very, very clear, right, is there's a domino effect. Anything that happens in the oil sector affects the gas sector. Anything that happens in the gas sector affects the power sector. So if we don't get it right in one, we cannot get it right further down the chain, which is what was happening before. So each and every single one from the top needs to be corrected for everything else to work better. The constitutional amendment for states to generate, transmit, and distribute their own electricity is a fantastic development because, various states can now use the resources that are closer to them. That's if they're serious about development. And this would actually show up the politicians, whether they mean, well for their people or not, because it's not a function that the resources are not there, right? It's a function of them utilizing those resources, right, to power their states so that their states become a lot more productive, right, which will eventually feed in to our GDP. So, if there's sunlight in your region and you're able to tap into renewable and battery energy, right, and revive your textile mills, right, and be able to produce for export, then there shouldn't be a problem. If you're close to water resources, right, and you can create mini dams, right, then you can create electricity, right, and produce within your areas. If you're close to gas resources, then you can invest in the necessary infrastructure, right, have thermal plants near you, right, for you to be able to power your industries and deliver for your people. So there's the opportunities are there. It's a function of whether, like I said, there's sincerity or purpose in pursuing it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I'll ask 2 more questions and then probably I'll open it up for the floor for questions from the participants.
Sorry, I can barely hear you.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, I will ask 2 more questions and then I'll open up the floor for others to ask their questions. One, I want to find out from you, the deregulation or the removal of subsidy on petrol. What do you think? Do you think it was properly done? If you agree that it should be removed, or do you think because the removal of that subsidy has created a lot of problems, that the government is now putting subsidy on all other things, that if they had left that subsidy alone and managed the corruption, we will not have to be buying bags of rice, looking for all the other things to do. I want to know what you think of that particular policy, if it was properly managed. The second piece of my question is, looking at all the other minerals that you spoke about, are we getting anything from them apart from petroleum? So all the other 44 mineral resources you said we had spread across the country. Is the government, whether at state level or federal level, at the moment, Do you think the government is making any income from those? And if we are not, what is the potential that we stand to get from those minerals if properly harnessed in dollar terms?
Okay, thank you very much,
Yes.
Mr. Enebi.
Yes.
On the issue of subsidy, whether, I mean, for me, it could have been gradual, and I think the government has now retraced itself, its steps, to see that, yes, you can't just eradicate subsidy overnight, right? It needs to be gradual, right? The vested interests need to be identified, right? And, those issues addressed properly. As you can see, just that announcement on its own has basically, almost turned everything on its head. But I think with the reversal of the policy, right, and then putting in place the necessary, what I would call buffers, then, it has, to be honest, it has no place in our system, because the amount of money that is gulping, if we were to dedicate that to gas infrastructure, I mean, we would be able to compete with the likes of Qatar, right? But unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. Hopefully, we should be able to get it right and eventually eradicate it. There's no place for it. The PIA doesn't provide for it. So it would have to be eliminated, but it needs to be eliminated gradually and completely phased out of our DNA. On the issue of minerals, yes, we are deriving income, but there are gaps. There are gaps in terms of export control. There's a lot of illegal mining going on. So, we're losing huge revenues. And for us to be able to capture that revenue, we must look to formalize illegal mining, right? And also artisanal miners, and see whether we can form co-ops like has been done in other jurisdictions, and then look to how we fund those co-ops, so that what they're producing, we can see it, and perhaps even set up local buying centers, right, whereby be it the state government, perhaps in collaboration with the federal government, actually buys the minerals and then seeks to export it itself. But for me, I'm a promoter of the private sector, so I would like to see a lot more private sector participation in that space, particularly the formalized space, because I think we're the only ones who can drive this and drive us to El Dorado.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I will open the floor for questions so that there can be engagement. I have.
Sorry.
I will open the floor now so that you can take some questions from the participants. And we will have further questions at the end of the day. Boyega Olorunfemi, you have your hand raised, and we have Professor Adenike Grinch also. I have Ita Edu. What we will do is we take 3 questions or comments at a time so that you can respond to them. many more people. So Boyega, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment or ask your question. Boyega, how are you? Unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good day to you, everyone, and thank you for bringing this forum together, and thank you for the presentation, sir. I'm actually going to maybe ask one or two questions. So this morning I was on the platform with the World Economic Forum, and we're looking at galvanizing sustainable finance into the clean energy sector. And then, and I think some of the issues that were discussed there also centers around the issue of accessibility, affordability, and then, and at the same time, the public-private partnership. How, looking at the way that we are handling the Nigerian oil and gas sector, and at the same time, we also want to unlock the potentials within the renewable energy sector as well. How are we able to make use of the combined sources to achieve the Nigerian transition to net zero? And then, do you think that a certain amount from the subsidy redistribution should be earmarked for funding for renewable energy sources for the poor people? Thank you.
Thank you, Boyega. Ola, I hope you noted that question and comment. Professor Denike Grinch, please go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alokolaro. Thank you. It was really very well put together for us. We can understand where we are going wrong. However, it seems that the strategies for putting us back on the right track have only just begun, although we did have them before. But because of instability of political situations, some of these attempts, some of these efforts were reversed midstream. So we have a job to do in making sure that we have policies and regulations that will disable those who do not have sincerity of purpose from discontinuing the good things that have been done. You've already mentioned that with regards to power, this has now been decentralized, and that's going to help us. Communication was decentralized, and we are enjoying it. When are we going to have decentralization of the of industrial strategies at the various state levels? If we have it now, please let us know. Secondly, you also said, well, you didn't say actually, about our debt situation. We are very much in debt. To what extent has this situation put us in a compromising position with all our efforts to industrialize? Thank you. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. We'll take the final comment from Professor Tokumbo or Tokes Onabanjo. Unmute yourself, Prof.
Yes, thank you so much, the organizers. Thank you so much for your insightfulness. Thank you so much for your being pragmatic. Thank you so much for your sagacity, and thank you so much for your boldness. I also in maturity in looking at all these sectors and seeing how do we go forward. My first question is, all over the world, the coastal wind and the sea, people are investing wind energy. They are putting turbines on the coastal to drive and create energy for industry. We have many oil platforms that have been either exhausted or abandoned. Is it possible, do you look at it that we can put turbines on them so we can have energy immediately? Second question, what do we need to do to stop the water wastage by burning gas? What do we need to do in the short run? Because we can harvest them immediately and be able to provide energy for our industry. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you all. I will allow you to respond to those comments and questions, and maybe if there are more, you'll take them. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Enebi. With respect to the first question on clean energy, accessibility, and affordability. Okay, so I want to say this. We need to be extremely careful, right? So the UN Sustainability Development Goals says that they want to eradicate poverty. I believe it's by 2030. And we want to move to net zero by 2060, right? Now, the whole essence of the SDG goals, right, is for us to use what we have to be able to get us out of poverty, right? And it is clear that the only thing that we have to elevate us out of poverty is our natural resources, right? But the same powers that be that have a stranglehold over the finance, right, say they don't want us or they cannot give us the necessary funds to develop our natural resources to be able to come out of poverty, right? So we need to be able to balance this hypocrisy, right? It's either you want us to come out of poverty, right? And for us to be able to develop clean energy and be able to have access to it and for it to be affordable, or you don't, right? So classifying, though they've classified it now, gas as dirty fuel and we have that in abundance, right? And we want to try and develop it to become a manufacturing nation, right? If we can't have access to funding to be able to do that, then we will remain in poverty. Neither will we be able to have, have this clean energy they talk about, because then we'll revert to firewood burning. So I think it's important for us to get that right and into perspective. With respect to Prof's questions, in terms of decentralization of strategies for states, I'm not too clear as to your question there, but I believe every state, pursues some form of economic agenda based on the resources that it has. And when I say resources, I'm not, in this sense, I'm not talking about natural resources, because the law and the Constitution is quite clear as to the federation holding that in trust for all the constituent states. Whether that is right or wrong, it is a question of what the law is as of today. In terms of level of debt compromising our ability to move forward, yes, it is. We can't keep borrowing to resolve our problems without, creating anything to earn. And if we keep shooting ourselves in the foot, or by, reducing what earns us revenue, then we're just acting in folly. So the government of the day needs to rise up to its responsibilities, right? And ensure that, you know, economically we can sustain ourselves, right? We've done it before. We've wiped out our debts. We can, okay? So it's, again, this issue around sincerity of purpose and whether we have a government that means well for its people. With respect to wind turbines and wave energy, the beauty about the new Electricity Act that was recently introduced that the new president assented to, right, is that it recognizes the need for all forms of renewables, right? And if indeed any state finds it cost effective, you know, to have wind turbines, if they have enough wind in their state, or even wave energy for those who are coastal states, right? Yes, by all means, they can deploy that. The key here is economic development, and if this can deliver that, it's within the ambit of the law and the policies that have been set by the government. And by the way, those states that are yet to develop their laws, electricity laws, right, should ensure that they take into consideration all forms of energy sources, so they have a diverse energy mix to be able to produce the needed electricity for their citizens. So I'm sure the oil and gas platforms that are disused could serve a very, very useful purpose in that regard. And of course, that would address any previous environmental concerns that those disused platforms may have created. Right. With respect to gas flaring, this is very interesting, and I didn't mention it, but just before the previous administration left, there was a competitive bid for some of the gas flare sites so that some carbon capture programs can be embarked upon. And this flare gas perhaps used in some of these communities to power those communities and make them more economically viable. So yes, there are gas flaring solutions in place, and of course, the recent laws has also sought to prohibit the amount of gas that is flared. It can only be flared if it is absolutely necessary, and it must be with the consent of the regulator.
Okay, thank you very much. Because we are winding down, we'll take one question from Olu, which is the only hand that is up. And then we'll take some questions and comments from the platform as well. So Olu, if you can go ahead, please, and unmute yourself.
Good evening, sir. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Great presentation with data. Two questions, but we'll talk about mining exploration, and then so we can make all the laws. Thank God we moved past that. We have all the policies. But I'm more bothered about the practicality of it. Okay, so we have Asari Dokubo, we have former militants in those areas. In Zamfara, where there's gold, there's terrorism going on. there's kidnapping going on. It looks like as though this is a calculated attempt to ensure that wherever we have resources, we make sure that that place becomes unsettled, there's no security. So if you were going to provide a solution to be able to properly explore our natural resources, what should we prioritize? How should we go about it? Nobody would invest in Nasarawa when you're not sure they won't kidnap your expatriates and all of that. So we've talked about money, we've talked about policies and laws. How do we prioritize? Where does security come in? Okay, to ensure there's a safe environment for exploration of our resources. First question. Second question, sir. I mean, so I don't know the difference between energy and power. Suddenly, I can't tell the difference. But now we have new electricity laws all over, the change tariffs and all of that. Why do we continue to have estimated billing, even though it's illegal? Okay, the law doesn't say, the law, in fact, France, the law, as I knew it, even before it was amended, did not legalize estimated billing. So if you have meters, if everybody has prepaid meters, you can increase tariffs all you want. People will simply be able to account for what they use. Why is it difficult? You're an expert, sir. Maybe you even consult for these power generating and distribution companies. Why is it so difficult to have prepaid meters everywhere so that people can account for whatever they are consuming? Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess that's the last question that we'll take. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for those questions. For any investor, right, to invest in, let's say, a mining venture, they have to ensure that there's political stability. And political stability also includes addressing any insecurities that may exist in terms of banditry, etc., etc. If you, as a government, cannot guarantee the safety of life and property, the likelihood is you will not be able to attract the necessary investment. Now, we say Zamfara is extremely rich in gold, pretty much the same in Western Nigeria and elsewhere. But if we are not able to guarantee the safety, then you simply will not see those kind of companies come in and invest and change our fortunes. So it really is in our hands collectively for us to ensure that Nigeria works, and that Nigeria works for all of us as opposed to some of us. Estimated billing shouldn't be allowed. It isn't allowed. That's why when the discos were struggling with respect to metering supply, the government introduced the meter asset providers, which is private arrangement between the discos and private entities to provide meters. Even when that wasn't achieving the desired result, the government also introduced the mass metering scheme about 2 years ago. It will take time to be able to roll out meters, particularly, like I said to you, given the fact that we're not really a manufacturing nation. We import some of these things, whether it's CKDs or SKDs, you understand. So, it will get better. And I think, now that the sector has been decentralized and, power will be closer to the people, right, you'll probably find that that arrangement is likely to change in the immediate future.
Thank you very much. I have one more person that has raised up a hand, but you know, I like the way you speak so calmly and gently about all these things. And like Olu said, you probably consult for some of these discos and energy companies. Meters are available internationally. People are willing to pay for them in Nigeria. All you need to do is bring them, we will pay. Install it so that we can know what we, so why is it taking so much time? You know, I mean, that's a question that people are asking. If we could go to the market and buy our own meters and come and install it so that they can read it, let them liberalize it so that anybody can bring the meter. I simply buy it, they fix it, and then they can read it. But, you know, the question of is taking a whole lot, how long? Any other thing they want to import, I mean, we don't produce them, obviously, but we can import it. And in large quantity, people will pay for it. Anyway, let me let Juliet ask a question. Juliet Chinyere.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chinyere, sorry. Yeah.
Good evening. Energy availability. My question is, energy availability is crucial for the economic growth of any nation. And we all know that Nigeria is blessed abundantly. However, the energy crisis in Nigeria is as a result of poor funding of the power sector, non-settlement of electricity bills, corruption, and shutting down of major power plants due to infrastructural decay and non-performance. Do you agree to this, sir? If yes, what proper solution can you prefer to remedy this situation? Thank you, sir.
I'm so sorry. Can you please just repeat that question? I'm really sorry about that.
I said the energy crisis in Nigeria is as a result of some of the things that I know, poor funding of the power sector, non-settlement of electricity bills, corruption, and shutting down of major power plants due to infrastructural decay and non-performance. Do you think, or do you agree to this, sir? What proper solution can you prefer to remedy this situation, sir? Thank you. Well done.
Thank you very much for that question. I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier on, we need to look at everything holistically, right? If you look at, you know, some of our actions in the past, we embarked on, you know, building power plants without really thinking of where the gas source or the feedstock to power those plants will come from, right? So we now started working backwards again, right? The key issue is for us to have some form of integrated resource management plan that looks at everything holistically, right? You should not be able to embark on building a power plant if there is no dedicated feedstock to it that would last for the lifetime of that plant, which could be anything between 10 to 25 years. So you can see the level of, or the depth of planning that needs to go into you just building a power plant. You can't just go and build it without knowing how it's going to be fueled for the next 20 or so years. So we need to really look at things a little bit more holistically to be able to deliver the dividends that the people so yearn for.
Okay, thank you very much for this insightful talk, presentations, and questions. I will hand over to Pastor Itua, we are coming round because we are rounding up at 6:30. Maybe he will have further comment and closing remark. Thank you very much, Ola, for this very brilliant expose. And we hope that we will not keep talking and talking about power, lights, energy, but someday in Nigeria, it will be a thing of the past. Pastor, if you are there, over to you, sir.
Sorry, sir. While we are getting Pastor, can I just say one sentence?
Yes.
I believe really what we are after is to have accountability frameworks embedded in policies so that citizens can be educated on this, on who is accountable, and hold that person. You know, pull the feet to the fire. Right now, we cannot get anybody to be accountable for anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Okay, while we're waiting for Pastor, really, I want to appreciate everyone. What we try to do here on ALG platform is to, interrogate issues, come up with solutions, and see how best we can make Nigeria work for every one of us. What we have had, in the last couple of years is a lot of, talking and policy churning out, and nobody, like Prof said, nobody is really taking responsibility for these things and making sure that we can hold them accountable. I think our government just do what they want to do, irrespective of what the people are saying. So that is where we really come in. We are doing some citizens' enlightenment so that we can necessarily hold our government to account. We are all crying the cost of living in Nigeria is high, and then the governors are just carrying on as if the legislators, everybody is just doing what they want. They went on recess the other day, took huge amounts of money for themselves, and so join us in this fight. We are trying to go out, get citizens to interrogate whatever policy government is putting forward, and let us get, look, you have no right to even, in Nigeria, they say, okay, if you're in government, we are not saying you shouldn't eat at all, but at least do small work. Why should you eat? Is it your money? We have billionaires in Nigeria that cannot produce, that have never produced a spoke in their life. They're all riding private jets, So I think the real issue is citizens should all come together. The government has failed. Let's not wait on them anymore. They can't kill all of us. Let's not be afraid. We can get this thing done. And that's what we are doing. We have a think tank. We have people that are working. We're going out to the communities, telling them what they need to do, how they need to interrogate their government. But we also realize that they are hungry. And so they are very vulnerable to these politicians that will bring money. So to aid them also, we are taking things to them. We are trying to empower them so that when we tell them not to take from the politicians and demand their rights, they will have a ground to stand on. So we need people to join us in this fight. We are also putting our money where our mouth is. We want to go out, mobilize people in Nigeria, and get everyone to be involved in this fight to rescue Nigeria back. We cannot just allow, these guys to do anything. This government now, all the people that have been put in position, first of all, you spend 100 million to buy party form. Is that 100 million money that you worked for? Do you so love the people that you are ready to spend 1 billion to get into leadership? Just enjoy your money. What are you? So we can see that they have no plans. And so we must be ready to hold them. We must be ready to go out there and do these things. Let me not start another someone here. Is Pastor there? Pastor Itwa.
I'm here. And if you are going to sermonize, I will take the offering.
Okay, I think it's 6:30 and we have decided to be keeping this thing to 1.5 hours so that people can go and do other things. And if you have any further questions, if not, your closing remarks are.
A very good interactive session with Mr. Alokolaro, who clearly clearly understands the challenges of the oil industry in Nigeria and what we're going through. And like somebody said, or he said, it all boils down to sincerity, insincerity, and graft, and lack of sense of purpose. I was reading the other day, or listening the other day, to Lee Kuan Yew when he addressed the parliament in Singapore, maybe for the last time. He was 90 years old. He came in frail, and he just wanted to say, we must keep it safe. We must have honest people in government. We must not tolerate corruption of any sort. We must not tolerate corruption of any sort. We must not tolerate corruption of any sort, because if we do, Singapore is finished, you know. And he sort of handed over to the next Prime Minister of Singapore with those words. And they have kept to that mantra. They have kept to that mantra of making sure that Singapore remains sane and is not finished. They're looking at Rwanda and places like that. But Nigeria, we have enthroned corruption. We have made it a culture. We've made it a sine qua non and a way of doing things. And therefore, we get a society that is underserved and misallocated in terms of resources. And it seems as though the problem is insoluble, and the people no longer are interested, even in good and sincere people, to drive this country forward. It's a very, very unusual and strange situation that we find ourselves in. I'm hoping that there will be enough boldness and sincerity among a few who would have the courage to say this is really the direction Nigeria should be going, and these are the values that we should stand for, and this is what we must insist on, instead of it being business as usual and job for the boys. Well, I'd like to thank you, sir, for coming. And I hope that some of the things we have espoused today, some people are listening and they will take them on to try and solve the problems of our industry. If you have any closing comments, Ola, please go ahead and make them. Otherwise, we'll bring the program.
No, just thank you very much for having me.
Any closing comments?
None. I think we can all go away and ruminate on what the issues are, and if we have the ears of those that are in power, particularly in the energy space, you know, if some of the recommendations or some of the issues discussed here can be shared with them, it would certainly help.
All right. In that case, all I need to do is to thank everyone for coming, especially those who ask questions. And thank you very, very much, Mr. Alokolaro, for your incisiveness and clarity of thought, and pray that one day we'll have the right people in the right place in our country. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening and have a lovely weekend ahead. And Nigeria will be great again. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Amen.
Thank you all. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you,
so
sir.
any announcement?
Any
announcement?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless you all. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.